as a trailer for a project called the Clothes Project, which has kept me very, very busy for the last couple of years. Probably the biggest project that I ever did. And it starts with just what the project is, and actually kind of goes into a little bit of background about what my work is, what I'm interested in, and so on. And I thought really I would start with that because it was 45 minutes of recordings that got edited down to 9 minutes, so it's quite dense, but I think it's quite a good background to what I'm all about. And then I'll tell you about some more recent pieces and change the pace will slow a little bit after that. The Clothes Project was a year-long project where from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, I took a single self-portrait every time that I changed a piece of clothing. In total, there are now 11,985 photos. I hope to show the project on a life-size screen where the 11,000 photos will be shown in very quick succession. So there's kind of a comical effect to it at some level. But I also think it's very important that that we have still photos on display as well. So either in the form of wallpaper, like small pictures all over the wall, or also in the form of books, like sort of almost like an encyclopedia of images for 1 year. Maybe 12 volumes, one for each month or something like that. As a whole, I would like the experience of walking into this exhibition to be really quite exhausting at some level, to really be confronted with the sheer number of micro-choices that we make in a year. The project did originate actually with a concern about the idea of the exhaustive, the complete diary. I got really interested in a sort of more scientific form of diary where you couldn't cheat, like you could actually get everything in that happened just on one variable, what I wear. The photos were taken in my bedroom where I had a full studio set up, and so I would have a remote control and just take self-portraits. Being a scientist also translates into the work in a number of ways. The first one is just visually, with having the grey card in every shot, with having the cross line, always making sure I'm standing exactly the same way, the very kind of white, simple background. The other way it translates into the project is this obsession with data gathering, with numbering, with presenting the work in a sort of what you see is what you get mode. Every photograph I took was then meticulously organized into folders day by day and getting everything in the right order, even though I couldn't obviously always photograph them in the right order. The hardest thing to deal with turned out to be when I was traveling, because if I went away for a week, I would then have to painstakingly take photos with my smartphone every time I changed clothes in every situation. The worst one was actually traveling to above the Arctic Circle in July, because it meant that when I came back I had to put tons of layers of clothing back on here in Switzerland in August, so I was literally sweating away and would realize, that I'd done put on all the clothes, taken everything off, but not actually put on my gloves or my hat. So back it all went, so that was extremely painful, but I stuck to it. Some people have commented that this is a very intimate project, which actually surprises me every time, because I just really see it as almost like an anthropological project. It is really about scientific data gathering. It isn't really about me. It could be about anybody. I would have been equally happy to do this with somebody else, and I would love to repeat the project with other people, except that it'd be a bit difficult to get someone else to volunteer for this. In terms of whether the project affected what I wear, this is where my scientific training really kicks in. So I have years of training, whether it be in physics, doing catalogs of star formation in galaxies, or in neuroscience. This kind of discipline where you're in data gathering mode and you make absolutely sure that you miss nothing kind of kicks in over and above any concerns about intimacy and exposing myself. It's about all of us, really. I think it's something that's utterly commonplace. It's about all these micro communications, choices that we make on what to wear and how we think that's going to affect our day or not affect it. Sometimes it's just a shrug of the shoulders. Other times perhaps we're trying to say something with what we're wearing, we want to be perceived in a certain way. This work is also about themes common to my other work, like the complexity of individuality, notions of identity, the complexity, it's about the complexity of identity, issues of individuality, of the subjective. It's about collections, data, numbering, labeling. It also relates to my other work because I'm really, as a painter, I'm really interested in layering. And so, you know, there's a layering of clothes, one thing goes on top of another, and there's the hidden layers of the underwear, things that you don't normally share. In the same way, in a painting, there's the first layers which get edited out and covered up, and it kind of maybe more private. It's been an interesting project for me because I've never done a project that was fully photographic. All my work has been about painting until now. But it does relate to my other work. So, for example, in terms of layering, I did this project where I painted 27 portraits of my mother and just painted one over the other. And it was also kind of portraying a person through different times in their lives and through the different, in this case it was styles borrowed from other artists. It relates to my obsession with crowds and with the complexity of the brain. So there are certain types of images which to me are abstract representations of the complexity of the brain. And this project, through the micro choices that it represents, is really one manifestation of the many, many decisions that our brain is taking every day, which is kind of like always, could be this, it could be that, and all sorts of conscious or subconscious factors come into these decisions, and I'm really interested in documenting that. Another element is that I have a PhD in neuroscience, and I think that really comes in quite heavily into the project. What I've been left with from my neuroscience days is just this complete awe of how complex the human brain is and how complex the processing is, how many different elements come into the simplest of our actions. Like getting dressed in the morning, it's something we all do, it's something we all have in common. In the same way, our brains actually, at a certain level, all look exactly the same. But at the same time, we're all absolutely individuals, and specifically in the process of making art, it is kind of about tending to that very, very individual space of doing something that is specific and original to us. Clothes and getting dressed is somewhere in between. It is a form of personal expression, but it's also something that everybody does and where we all tend to follow quite accepted norms. So we all wear similar sort of things for certain occasions, certain sports, or so it's somewhere between that individualism and something we all have in common. What we all have in common is what you study through science. What we do as absolute individuals is closer to art. I get asked a lot if there's a deeper meaning with this project. By design, no. It started off as something very, very simple, just almost like I said, scientific curiosity. However, as I then did it and, you know, dedicated at the end more than a year and a half to this project, both in terms of setting it up and processing it afterwards, I started thinking a lot about clothes in terms of feminism and consumption. Finishing the project was a huge relief. It was only when I finished that I realized what a strain it had been, and it took me weeks to not reach for my mobile phone if I took my coat off. Yeah, I'm glad it's over. No, it'd be nice to have something more.
That was actually really good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that. I'm glad it's twice.
Right, when you use that.
I think that was good.
Excellent.
Cool.
Yeah, so actually I hadn't realised how much I say in there, so I can kind of go home now. So this was a trailer that was made about a year before. In the end, a year before, I managed to find a place to show it because it wasn't trivial. It's not easy to place in a commercial gallery because it's not easy to sell as a project. But finally, I got to sort of show at Untitled Chapter in Geneva, and this is the poster for it. And so I thought the next thing I would do was just to walk you through this exhibition, which was my first Swiss show, and was conceived in collaboration with Joseph Farin, who some of you will have met at the panel last week. So this is what it actually ended up looking like. And I thought it was also interesting here to talk about the gap between concept and actual, how the work comes out. So it was technically really, really difficult to do. Printing the wallpaper, a lot of technical issues here. But I did have this movie going, and I think I've got a little bit just of the movie here, so you can experience that. That's actually quite good. It comes out more or less life-size, so when this is standing on the floor of the gallery, you're very much kind of eye level with me, and these kind of crazy fast changes. Those are the first 2 weeks of the year. I'm going to show all of that. And then the books happened as well. It's quite fun to see the video. I'm like kind of waving my hands in the air about an encyclopedia. It happened, a lot of sweat and tears. But there are 12 volumes and every photo is printed, and I've started the task of annotating them by hand. Just writing what the change consists in, because it's not always obvious, and then reconstituting the year in terms of where I was and what I was doing and what kind of decisions went into wearing what I did. So that's the 12 volumes on a table that I built as well, and that's a sort of wide-angle view of the room at the back of Untitled Chapter with the wallpaper, the projection, and the books. That's a close-up. So it ended up being really important to have all three of these. There's the kind of, it's almost like three different rhythms. One, you have them all over a half-hour loop. The other one, you see much more the rhythms of the days, clothes going on and off, and you have these sort of stripes that happen. And then you can slow it right down by turning the pages of the book and with the handwriting. Yeah, I was quite pleased with that. And that's just a wallpaper by itself. This is another work that was in the same exhibition. I should actually go back to the title of the exhibition, which was Categories of Near Infinite Permutations. This exhibition kind of ended up marking the point where I really made a very strong link between my work as a neuroscientist and as an artist. I was just saying in the podcast that we recorded how when I first went to art school, there was this tremendous pressure amongst my tutors to get me to do work that related to the brain. And I was like, look guys, I just left the lab here, so leave me alone. I'm here because I'm interested in painting. And so for a long time, I did paintings of crowds and you know, always really interested in the place of the individual, which that's kind of the first reaction to the art school, is to notice how much the individual matters compared to the scientific lab. And so the title, Near Infinite Categories of Near Infinite Permutations, were kind of the way I would describe each of these works. So the Close project is a category of near infinite permutations, because obviously even with the sort of normal wardrobe that I have, there are near infinite permutations of what I could put on when, in which order, and which layers. This one is made from 1,000 different origami papers, which I'm going to show you in a minute. The reason I'm interested in origami papers, I mean, they're beautiful. I'm very interested in Japanese design and traditions. But what is really striking about them is that if you look at them close, they only have actually a few handfuls of different designs that are then kind of, you can have maple leaves together with waves, you can have waves together with fans, you can have fans with cherry blossoms, or you can have wave cherry blossoms and fans, or there are any kind of possible permutations within a very, very tight, you'll no doubt when you see a Japanese paper whether it's a real Japanese origami paper or not. It's a very sort of tight group, but the permutations are near infinite. The distribution that I use is a Fibonacci spiral. So it's a mathematical construct that derives from the golden section, and it has two properties that were important to me in this work. One is that all the origami birds are equidistant from one another, so the spacing between them, and they're not birds, by the way, they are butterflies that are pinned down. And the other thing is that you can always add one. So in a normal spiral, the spiral would have an end, and you could kind of see where it stops. In the Fibonacci spiral, the next point might be at the top of the circle, and then the point after would be down bottom left, and the next point would be bottom right. And so you can always add one more point, and it will always look like a perfect circle. So there are exactly 1,000 here, which was kind of, I don't know, a scientist's moment to stop. But in actual fact, you keep adding to it, and that's quite important because it's a near infinite category of permutation. Yeah, this is a little video just of the collection of origami papers before they even got turned into butterflies. And so I'd kind of classified them. I got to 500 fairly easily, and it took almost 5 years to find the next 500 because every time I found a new origami paper, I would have to go through the first 500, check I didn't have it. And some designs are obviously much more popular than others, so when you buy a pack of 20, there comes a point where you already have 19 of them. But I got a help as well from, thank God for Facebook, is all I can say, to find the last lot. But I really liked it just in this format. It gave me a tremendous amount of pleasure already. So, and then there was the mounting of the birds. If I can actually scroll anywhere. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. No, I wanted to find the scroll bar. Sorry, I need a couple of minutes as it started. So that's pinning them down, and I used, the hardest thing about this was to find the foam board glue and paper combination that would allow me to get a perfect surface of watercolor paper over layers of foam board without it wrinkling or crinkling, or building the frame was a total nightmare. But it was really, really important for me to have the insect pins, which come from entomology shop in Paris. So they're kind of the real thing, and there was this kind of pinning it down in an exact spot. So I used Excel to produce the dots of this function, and then pinning them down exactly was really important. In the past, I just glued such things to a background, and yeah. So there is this kind of a scientist's approach to things. In the painting department at the Slade, the head of our painting course said, "Nina, I can tell you're a scientist because you're pulling the wings of the butterfly." She wasn't very happy about something I'd done. I'll show you what work it was. And I said to her, "That's okay, I think painting can take it." But I will take things apart. I've punched holes in paintings and cut them into little pieces, and yeah, I quite like this of pinning things down in art is almost impossible. So yeah, so that's that, and that's the finished close-up. So you can see the insect pins and the birds. This was the other very large installation at Andata Ritorno. Forgotten what the final title was. It used to be called 2023 Samples of Marks from the University of the Arts London, and since then it's grown, so we're more than, I think, 2,500 approximately now. I think I have some close-ups, yeah. So this installation is made of something that looks like microscope slides, and the photograph, the little cutouts are from high-definition printouts of photos taken with a macro lens around the University of the Arts London, which consists of 7 art colleges. I went around with flash arms and a macro lens and took pictures of all the marks, the types of mark making that I could find. So this could be from, I went around during the degree shows, got permissions from all the students collectively to do this, and took, these are slightly magnified parts of the paintings, but not so you can tell what the subject, some of these will be portraits or landscapes or still lives, whatever, but you can't tell what it's of, but just what the mark is. So it's kind of like the quantum of paint making or applying one color on another. And I collected these over a whole summer. I took about 5,000 photos and edited it down to 2023 for the first round. And then in the last 7 years, I've added to it because I have a studio in Trelew where I welcome other artists. I run artist residencies in different places in the world, but one under my own roof where I've welcomed 125 artists. And so I've added to this library of the marks that I've experienced first at university and then through the people coming to visit me at Trelew. And then the last thing to go in is actually that I went back and did the same thing to all my own paintings. So that's kind of, there's all the input and then there's years of output in there as well. And they're presented as microscope slides so that they have, if it's an identified artist, there's the name of the artist, the year in which they painted it, the location where it was taken, and then there's a catalogue number. But some of them will say inside bin, Chelsea College of Art, and then the catalogue number, because I will have found this inside the bin or on the floor or on a board in the toilet, in the courtyard. There are a lot of marks in colleges, and the book that goes with it is called Déjà Vu, which I think I don't need to translate in this context. And it's kind of I think that the work is an expression of just a sense of dizziness face to face with the history of painting. I mean, people have been painting for thousands of years, and when you start at an art college at the age of 30, as I did late, the sheer volume of the history of painting is absolutely staggering, and there's a bit of a kind of, what am I going to add to this? And so this is perhaps also an expression of something very personal, just a slightly overwhelming constellation, a universe that's like, well, I'll add my mark to that then, shall I? Yeah, here's some other installation shots and some close-ups. Video. Oh, there you are. I wanted to be able to go through quickly. Oh, here we are. I think I can do this little trick here. Get a sense of it. So I can look at this for hours. How long can make you? But my relationship to painting is one where this sort of thing just makes me want to paint. It nearly makes me drool. I certainly dream about it, and it's pretty much the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning, often, if it's not the kids. So, yeah. I want to have a go at each one of these marks, just like all of that. That's the book. That was called Déjà Vu, where I selected 250 of them, and then I kind of grouped them and put the ones that are very, very similar to one another next to each other, but then the title underneath tells the story that they come from completely different places and different people, and some of them are completely accidental and basically look exactly like the very deliberate mark that's been made in a finished artwork. So this is a shot of the first room. The door on the back is the one that led to the closed project with the origamis on the right. And then I had some books, the one I told you about, and this is the next book that's called 1,000 Round Drawings. That's probably a little bit of a neuroscience experiment. What I did was that I had start the video. Yeah, I had a box of 1,000 little labels of the sorts that scientists used to label specimens. I think they probably still use them in the Natural History Museum or in archaeology, for that matter. And then I had a numbering stamp. and I just had to number something. So I numbered the labels 1 to 1,000. And I thought, why should I draw on them? And I haven't done any representational painting for a long time. It's been paintings of other paintings, so a lot of paintings from those circles that I showed you. And I thought, oh, well, one reason for that is I don't know where to start with the image, because I feel that we're so saturated with images nowadays with the web and everything. And I kind of was sort of like, well, I could draw anything. I probably, can draw without even stopping, just draw non-stop. It's not difficult. And even if I just keep to round drawings, I wonder how far I can get. How difficult will it be to get to 1,000? Well, it's not difficult at all, basically. It's just think, one idea brings on the next and the next and the next, and you look up and you see round things, you draw that, and it brings on another. So it's kind of like at the end, this artwork represents a train of thought, one thing that leads on to the next. Sometimes it's very clear how they're related to one another, and other times it's a kind of a leap of different thought altogether. I'm touching something here. So that's the 1,000. Oh, I put this one put this slide in a little bit to talk about the brain. And so this train of thought of the 1,000 drawings obviously is just personal to me. No one in this room would ever draw those 1,000 in the same order, and I find that an amazing fact. My favorite fact about the brain is that with the billions of brain cells that we have between our ears, and each of which on average makes 1,000 connections to other brain cells. Obviously not the same one in each of us, because those connections depend on our experiences, on upbringing, everything. Then the additional fact that each of those connections can vary in intensity, in chemical makeup, in the thing that's really kind of progressed in the last 20-25 years of neuroscience is that we every year, every month, we'll find another little molecular piece that basically introduces a new variable at the level of two nerve cells communicating with one another. So there's a near infinite number of permutations in how a human brain can be wired up. If I take a little piece out of each of our brains, I can't tell the difference under a microscope, even a very powerful one. But the number of ways in which the human brain can be wired up, the number of possible states, so to speak, exceeds the number of elementary particles in the universe. I'll just say that again because it's so cool. The number of ways in which your brain can be wired up exceeds the number of elementary particles in the universe. So this thing of being an individual is, 100 years ago, we needed very much to invoke a soul, something God-given from outside, to describe this thing that I'm different from you. And nowadays, it's an absolute neurological fact. I mean, no two brains in the entire history of humanity will ever be in the same state. It's another cool fact. And so I think that's something that I have very much in mind when I am being an artist. Is very much a question of aesthetic choice. It's not a shortage of ideas so much, limits of creativity so much as deciding which artwork I'm going to do next, one or the other, and it feels dizzying, and the world of possibilities is simply immense, and I think this is the reason why. And I also think for me that's the beauty of art, is that art is the only human activity that taps into that variety. Almost everything else that we do as humans is to do with a certain level of consensus. So people who are starting up a business, what they want to know is to find the one product that all of us want to buy, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a philosopher, as my husband is, he is working in terms of consensus. His job is to find theories and ideas that a large number of philosophers in the first place can agree with, and then hopefully, the rest of the world will tag along with the moral precepts that he's trying to develop. But art is about that place maybe closer to madness, and I don't think it's a coincidence that art and madness are linked, where you explore this individuality. You go for something that has to be original and specific to you. When I walked out of the science lab, I made copies of my lab books, copies of the data, a copy of my hard drive, and left the whole thing with my colleagues so that they could continue my experiments. If I were to be run over by a car tomorrow, no one can continue my art. This is really 100% tied to me, to who I am. It's not reproducible in any way. And I think that's fundamentally the value of art. So that was a bit of a philosophical aside, but I want to talk about this. It's important to understand my art, that these are images that I love. My use of color as well is very much tied to this sort of scientific image. I use pink, for example, not because I like pink, but because it's there, and it adds to the crowd of possibilities of possible permutations. This is images, by the way, from the rainbow mouse, and these are obtained by getting all the brain cells in a slice of mouse brain to express a fluorescent marker, and at random between, and the scientists basically use every color of fluorescent marker at their disposal. And when I paint, I tend to use every single tube in the box. That's a bit a detail, like even smaller scale than the previous images. I've forgotten what video. No, I won't talk about that now. Okay. This is a book. Again, I talked a little bit about layers. In the first video you saw, this is called Transparent Crowds, and it's actually a series of studies that I did on the cheapest paper that I had available in the studio at the time. And some of them are actually from Scientific Illustration, some of this one is from Cityscape, that one is I've circled flowers in a field. And then somebody was teaching me how to do Japanese binding. I make a lot of books, and I just really like how I'm undoing an image on the right and making a new image on the left. And there, again, near infinite number of permutations of possible images, and a really satisfying sound. So, yeah, that just snuck in there. What's the next image? Oh, that's important. So this is the exercise that I did at the Slade, where I was told that I was pulling the wings off the butterfly. This is a retake here in Trele, working with Sarah Noel Jones on the left. I was also interested in copies, and so, you know, I was talking about originality and artwork that's only mine. And here so there were a lot of motivators for this. One was just being in an art school and kind of, you know, a lot of things are taught by, here's a model and then you copy, and so it felt like sort of a cheeky thing to do. Well, I'm in an art school, so I learn how to paint. So we have a little piece on the left which she is copying for, and then at some point we swap places. And it was also about the mark, so we chose something that has a very expressive mark to it, kind of references American abstract expressionism, which is, you know, very old now, from the 60s and so on. But a lot of, I have a bit of an issue with young people now painting with this great gesture, like, I feel. And the point is, it doesn't have the same freshness as back in the 60s, because you are now quoting art history. So this is a very historical painting. Just even to be painting with oil on canvas is, if you study at the Slade now, it's the people from the media department look at you like some sort of dinosaur. So there was kind of that anxiety to deal with. And then the scientist in me is just like, how closely can we actually control this? We both have years of experience of painting at this point, and it's also kind of about the part of accident and control. So this is called second derivative because it's the second time we did it. The first one was called control condition. Yeah, So, and we tend to hang these a little bit apart from each other in a show when they're being shown. And the first time I showed these in my degree show, people come and go, oh my, it wasn't these slightly different colors and so on. Oh my God, it looks like a volcano. Oh my God, this one looks like on the sea. Oh wow. And then they see the second one, and it's like, hang on a second, because there isn't supposed to be a second one in art. I think that's also the point here. But I was told, a student said, you're not a real painter, are you? That was the title of my show in New York in December. You're not a real painter, she said. So I think that's fun. But I am, I don't know if I'm a real painter. I think it's a hysterical question, but I can't help it. So this is the painting on the left. You saw in the first video this painting I did with portraits of my mother, one on top of the other. I really, really like painting one color on top of another, so I thought, heck, I'll just do that. And I started with pale pink at the top, first tube I pulled out of the drawer that day, and I painted the whole board. And then I put a little bit of masking tape on and sealed it off, and so that I could paint green over pink. And then I painted blue over the green, and 72 layers later, and I think a happy month of painting at least one layer on every day. So always some painting to do, whatever else was going on in my life or in the studio. I'd get a bit of painting done. I even traveled with this to Davos, and snuck in a couple of layers there. And then I thought, well, I'll repeat the whole thing without masking tape. So that's the one on the right. And I think I'm about to start another one of these. And so it's called 72 Layers and a Brush. It's the title, that's what it is. And this is the last room at Andata Ritorno was an installation with a print of me that you saw also right at the beginning. It's called Self-Portrait of the Artist with Two Failed Projects. That's the photograph in the back. If you ever go to Andata Ritorno, don't miss the space right as you come in. On your left from the door, there's a little hole in the wall, and there's actually quite a big space behind that where you're invited to install something. So I built a box and made this installation with a large print of this self-portrait with two failed projects in the back, and then there are cutouts of all sorts of paintings, failures, things that I've long done. I did do, there's a breast over on the right, because I did do my stint of portraiture in oil for 4 months in Florence at one point, and lots of desert landscapes. There's all sorts of paintings in there, cut into pieces. There are the offcuts from books that I've made down at the bottom, and there are pots in which I've mixed paint. So this was called Étant Donné, which is the name of the space, which is after work by Duchamp, where you approach an installation that Duchamp made through a keyhole in something that looks like a huge barn door. And when you look through the keyhole, you actually find yourself gazing right up at the crotch of a woman lying in a field with a very phallic waterfall in the background. So it's sort of, and so I thought, what can I do with this space, étant donné? And I thought, well, I'll put my failures in there and the mess in my mind as well. So I think there's also this very scientific need to organize my artwork is also a reaction to the mess. It's a coping mechanism with the crowd of ideas and possibilities and possible permutations in my mind. And so it felt right that in this étant donné, which is I guess as a woman especially, it's an invitation to do something that's, I wasn't going to let anybody stare at my crotch, but something a bit more intimate. And I thought my failures are the bits that don't normally make it to the studio, to the gallery, sorry. And and I think that's it. And there are another 300 works on my website, which you're welcome to explore with a health warning, because it's organized as a kind of mind map. So at the bottom, I write a little bit about every, which I could probably call it up here. So if I just scroll around, you can, the reason I've done this is my own archive, so there is every work that I've made that I actually bothered to document in any case, and I also wanted to start where I started, so you can see the first live drawings, and which I did in a year off between studying physics and neuroscience, and kind of where it went from there. And because I have an allergy to artist websites with 15 images of really finished work that's just like, ta. There's no genius behind this. There's a lot of trials and errors and failures and a lot of years of hard draft. It's much harder work being an artist than it is to be a lab scientist. And I can go on about this for a long time. So feel free to explore. And then, yeah, like I said, at the bottom of every work has a little explanation, and then at the bottom there will be related works. So that's one way in which you can navigate the site, just jumping through the years of things that I was doing. And that's it. Thank you.